Okay, so I go for my question.
Well, I think it's recording already. So, um, this is the discussion number 7, God is Red podcast for American Indigenous philosophy. And our chapter was number 8. And yeah, you can go ahead with your question.
Alright. In what ways does the author suggest that Western interpre- interpretation of a linear and homogeneous experience of the time influenced by the Greek philosophy has affected the interpretation of the celestial events and religious beliefs?
Yeah, there wasn't much Greek philosophy mentioned in the chapter, especially for the first couple pages. It just kind of went over how it is similar to it because Western philosophy aligned with rather experiences than I think it was a spatial timeline. Let's see. It was the history and time of what had happened rather than understanding their like spatial, which would be the environment. So I liked the connection between the question, at least between the Greek philosophy and how the experience can be related to celestial events and religious beliefs for Indigenous Americans, at least in chapter 8. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the same. I think that the chapter is like this is just like the first part. The chapter reflects the Greek philosophy that has that too religious
Mhm.
narratives that overlooks significant historical events.
Yeah, I think something really particular with the events of Greek philosophy was that it mentioned the supernova and the meteors. And what was the other ones?
Comets and gamma ray bursts.
Yeah, like they kind of just ignored it and they're like, oh, like, well, Westerners kind of ignored it because they were like, this is like significant to what we believe in our religion and kind of dismissed it as a kind of important factor in history.
Mhm.
Compared to indigenous people, they were recording it. The Hopi recorded it against the rock walls. And they're like, oh, like this happened. And then researchers, and I don't know the difference between archaeological or paleontologians. I pronounced that wrong. But um they both went and said that these are like thousands of years old, the recordings that the Hopi did on against the walls of the artwork. I think that was nice to mention in chapter 8 at least.
Mhm. The, the third question is how do the creation stories of Native American tribes, particularly the hippie, challenging traditional Western interpretations of knowledge, and what implications does these stories have understanding the relationship between land, identity, and religious experience?
I don't think there was a specific um description of how the Hopi originated according to like Native American tribal religions, other
Mhm.
than like that the world burned, well, not the world burned, but it went through different phases of environmental like weather changes. And so it just went from documenting that and how they originally like preserved that information and not like, oh, they came from the creation of God. And even though there was a God for the Hopi or for indigenous tribal religions, there wasn't one specific one that they all shared un universally. Especially when
Mhm.
I think I think it was Greater Spirit that they didn't even give him like a human figure, you know? They just kind of like gave him significance and a name rather than like setting a particular face and like body to him or like age set. You know how like they kind of gave Jesus like long hair, kind of like a messy beard,
Yeah.
same outfit, but like then indigenous natives didn't really like do the same thing for them.
No, they follow their own religious like beliefs. They have their like, own like festivals and gods
Hmm. Yeah, there's like the Sky Woman,
and their like ceremonial events.
yeah, like the Turtle Island and stuff like that. There's like so many different variations, like, and even though the Hopi had gone and documented the 4 different endings and like occurrences of the world, it wasn't really like specific. But it definitely resonates with chapter 8 for sure, because it it proved that Westerners had like a specific set and person in mind when it came to like God or their religion, rather than, oh, okay, it's just like the way it is. Like the indigenous people cared about their land and thought that they were simultaneously living and sustaining with it, rather than
Uh-huh.
like that they were better than everything else.
All right. Last question or yours?
Uh, we could go with the next question, I think. Or we
No,
were on the second question.
no, that's the third question.
Oh, okay. My third question. Well, what was your answer for your second question or the third question?
The third question?
For the how do like creation stories of a Native American tribes challenge traditional Western interpretations of mythology?
All right, the third question is like that the Western interpretation of mythology by emphasize in the emphasize the connection of between the deep connection between land identity and spiritual presence.
Mhm.
These narratives often discuss the earth as a living entity, suggesting that human existence is entirely tied to the natural world that and the land that is not merely a resource but a scarce space. In world with meaning. As a result, these stories call for revelations how cultures emphasize that their religious and the relationship to the environment.
Pretty much, basically. Um, Another thing that was mentioned specifically for the difference between the religions, other than like assigning a specific higher source of power, was that
Mhm.
Christians believed, well, that from creation, Christians believed that they were doomed from the beginning and doomed till like the end of time, whereas indigenous people kind of viewed it as inevitable and were like, oh, it's gonna happen, but we're technically not a part of it. Like we're just kind of chilling here. And how like for Christians, both nature and man are doomed, but men were dominating over the rest of nature and creation for some reason, even though, well, that specifically tied back to Adam and Eve because it was like, oh, like the snake and the apple was the reason why like nature is doomed. Like we shouldn't partake in understanding nature or our environment because it's just not like pure or it's considered a sin. Something like that. Do you agree?
Yeah,
All right. And then for question number 3, well, my question is,
yeah.
what do you think would be the fifth world ending? And do you think its cause would be a Western political conflict, as chapter 5 indicates?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
it could be a war all over again. I think.
because the concept of free will often reflects into mediation of indigenous communities that exist within the geopolitical boundaries of powerful nations, yet remaining largely disconnected from the mainstream society
Oh yeah.
and
Especially
resources.
like individualism is becoming like such like a prominent feature in socializing. Like they
Mhm.
only solely care about themselves rather than like understanding the rest of the community or the environment. I think it was the second and third factor that the, the material greed of learning how to like learning the arts of trade and commerce mentioned in chapter 8 was the reason why it had transferred back into the Ice Age, and that would be, I believe, the second or third ending, because men were just like, yeah, we know how to do this, so we're gonna exploit the resources and just like take and give what we not need, but what we want and needs.
Mhm.
Wait, I meant those ones. But yes. And then the following questions for that one was what do you think the world's going to look like? According to the Hopi, since they have documented the four Astaprophes. Astaprophe? Not sure.
I think the world might just end. The world can end by manifesting various ways, including environmental collapse due to climate change or to cross-structural events, natural events, or even self-destruction such as nuclear war can
Mm.
be, or technology like take over such as like robots, AI.
Especially with AI, it's like taking so much of the
Yeah, that's taking like
pattern.
many jobs and like and also like creating more into like making us a real person anyway, like making a real person.
Mm. Yeah, my sister mentioned yesterday that one search on ChatGPT is equivalent to like wasting one water bottle. So I think that was kind of significant because AI, like it's only deemed as like, oh, use me, I can make your life easier, but it's like actually kind of exploiting the like resources that we actually need. Right. Well, other than the climate change, like it can be viewed as a world burning. Like some denomination churches actually believe that like the world is gonna end soon because of climate change, even though climate change isn't like a man issue rather than the actual environment itself.
Yeah, it is. Because climate change can end the world. It can end it. Like, not just change like the climates around the world. Maybe the Sahara would get more rain and become more green,
Mhm.
and maybe the North Pole become more like habitable.
Yeah, I think that was also something that was mentioned in chapter 8 at least because it even said that the first two worlds went from the west to the east. So that's how it became like very cold. That's how the Hopi described it as like the ice age and like pretty much everything else. And then the last two was from the east to the west, which is what we are in now. And that's how the flood happened because the ice age melted, or that's how the Hopi documented it as. So technically, if we were to like do another world ending, if climate change did end the world in a political manner or whichever manner, do you think it would go from like the south to north or like the north to south? And do you think it would be like kind of a jungle, or do you think it would be drier? Not sure. Or maybe like a mix between like everything's just green or everything's just yellow.
Yeah, I think it would go first. It'll be north.
North to south?
Yeah,
Do you think it's because like the north is more considered powerful? Like,
yeah, because it could like, collapse easily.
mhm.
Since
Well,
the north has more power than the south, and the south doesn't really have many resources.
if it is a political power that would be ending the world,
Yeah,
um, do you think because the South has so much like vengeance to take over, like do you think it would make that shift from the South to North? Especially now
yeah,
with like everyone claiming, well, I say everyone, but I don't know. It's very like ambiguous. But how the global South is technically is a victim of US like fascism and imperialism. So it would be like
yeah.
taking over whatever everything that the US had taken or exploded. Yeah. Especially with the environment, like the global South has so many different resources, like how Haiti had so much sugar, and then there's another instance of
Oil and then
minerals, land.
farming and
Yeah, farming, cattle, pretty much everything.
mining.
Labor too. Like there's a like exploiting indigenous peoples as slaves is something else too that they do. But it's still happening. So
Yeah,
it's like a huge disconnect between the actual, I want to say, like Western philosophy compared to indigenous or more environmental related thoughts. Because the one, it was stated in chapter 8 that Adam's sin of eating the apple detached humankind from the environment that is corrupt and beyond assumption. I mean redemption. So
Mhm.
even though man and nature were being corrupt, like man still believed that they were exempt from committing sin, despite like taking over every resource and exploiting people's marginalized people's minorities, able people that white people can take their hands on. I don't know. Chapter 8 was really interesting on this.
Yeah, because chapter 8 is like just address themes like conflict resolution, social change, or personal growth. For
For both religions.
yeah,
I don't know. I liked it. So I think that would be the end of our podcast.
all right. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Bye.